Hello, everyone. I am Amy Vaughn, CEO of Together Digital, and I am here today with you to enjoy another Friday of She Rocks. Together Digital is an amazing community of women from across the country who work in digital or digital adjacent fields. We work to ask for what we need without any sorts of shame or guilt and give without any sort of judgment. If you are wondering about my poor face right now, just FYI, I am okay. I had some dental work done this morning and it's not quite done yet. So I am okay. I was talking to my husband on my way and I was like, how bad is it, honey? And I'm smiling at him and he's like, just tell people so they don't think you're having a stroke or anything. I was like, okay, I guess I will. So all is well. We are here today with Olga Yurovski. Hard also to say with half a numb mouth. So I'm sorry, Olga. We'll get to her in just a minute, but we're going to be talking about her career journey and her experience in kind of going from corporate into a tech startup. And her background isn't necessarily in tech, but she saw a problem and a possibility and a solution for something that plagued her industry for years. So I'm excited for you all to meet her. Also, want those of you who are watching to know that we are doing a really cool promotion right now. We are offering a $140 off our annual membership in kind of celebration, in celebration of our 5-year anniversary. So the fact that this group has made it through this last year, much less 5 years, we were tremendously proud of, and we are excited to be offering our founding member rate for the next week and a half. So this goes till February 15th. So if you're not a member yet, check it out. If you're a member and you love this group and you get everything out of it that we're always saying you'll get out of it, which I know is a lot of you, then definitely please pass that message along. All right. Let us know where you're listening from today. I'm going to kind of like banter for just a minute to make sure people get time to pop on. I realized once we do these live, when we used to do them as closed Zooms for members only, we usually have people joining a few minutes after. I know you're all coming from different meetings from the day. So anyways, let us know where you're listening from. Be active in the chat. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're thinking, but we want to know if you are feeling what Olga's sharing today, which I am certain you will. If you have questions for Olga, we want you to pop them into the chat. There will be absolutely time at the end of this for you to ask questions. That's the beauty of Together Digital. When we come together, whether it's in person or virtual, is we want you to be a part of the conversation. This isn't just you come and you listen and you go away, So definitely let us know where you're listening from. And San Francisco Bay Area. Awesome. Thank you, Angela. It's nice to see you. And then we'll get started. I'm going to go ahead and bring Olga in, give my face a rest. Olga, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Amy. I am very excited and honored. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, of course. So I can just take a rest and not keep talking. I'm going to let you kind of give the group a little bit about yourself. And then whenever you're ready to start sharing your screen and talking this through, you just carry on. I will be here listening to the group, popping up questions and chat comments as they come in.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. This is Olga speaking. I'm going to start sharing my screen, so I won't see your comments, but please do pop them as they come. It's going to be a very casual conversation. I don't think we need to hold all the questions till the end, but if you want to wait, that's fine as well. Here comes my screen share. Can you see it, Amy?
Yeah, you're good. You're on.
Great. Yeah, so the topic of today's conversation is about transitioning from a corporate job into the world of startups, and not just for any person, but for somebody who's completely non-technical. I am a former CPG marketer. I spent 15 years working in the industry selling fem care products, tobacco, printers, and then food products for the companies on the left. And I really had a good time. I enjoyed the CPG marketing space. But there was a time when my world completely turned upside down. That was in 2014 when I made a decision that I don't regret right now, but it was a really risky one. And I became a founder and CEO of Shoperations. Shoperations is my company. It's a software as a service. It's a company that services my former industry. Essentially, I'm helping my former colleagues and peers to automate their job and make it more efficient. I'll tell a little bit more about how exactly I came up with the idea in the future slides, but this just gives you an idea of what my background was and what I'm doing right now. So for the last 6.5 years, I've been in the world of startups, technology, and I had to learn a lot. So what I'm hoping to do today is share with you lessons that I learned in my startup journey. There were a lot, and I tried to synthesize the most interesting aha moments. There's a lot of resources and tools for people who want to start a company, and a tech company at that, and I can share those as well. There's going to be links in the slides, and you will have a chance to download this presentation, so don't worry about writing things down. You'll be able to get a copy later. Also, looking back, what would I do differently if I were to do it all over again? There were a couple of lessons I learned that made me reconsider my approach. And I'm also very optimistic about enterprise and transformation industry and why non-technical founders have a really big role to play in this journey. I actually have a blog where I interview former CPG marketers who are now running companies. And I always just ask them questions about how did the idea come to be? What was your thought process? How did you go about quitting? And one of the subscribers recently sent me a message saying, don't forget to interview yourself. And I thought it was really interesting because right around this time, Amy reached out to me and we had a conversation, and she recommended that I speak about my journey at this event. So this is the first time I'm actually putting together the thoughts. I was running so fast the last 6.5 years. I didn't really have time to process all of this experience, synthesize learnings. So this is the inaugural speech. I haven't done this before in such a level of details. I've told my story very briefly as part of introductions, but today you will see a lot of just thoughts that I put on the slides and just explaining the story in a chronological order, how it all came about. So first of all, back in 2014, I was not ready to be a startup founder. I was just a typical person who just doesn't know where to begin. First of all, I don't have any family, rich friends, or any sort of VC connections because I'm an immigrant. I've been in this country for 20 years, and all of this time I was in school and in the corporate world. I did not reach out, I did not build connections, and so I don't really have a rich pockets to reach out to. I'm a woman, so I've never seen in my circle of friends a woman who runs a startup, a tech startup at that. So I really didn't have anybody to follow at that point. As a marketer, spent the entire career in marketing, I couldn't speak tech. I was curious about technology, but I was never very confident about technology. So developing a product is something that I really didn't even know where to start. And like I said, I was a corporate soldier. I grew up in the Soviet Union. I was born in Ukraine, and my parents were working for the state. And then they never had a business, and I was not growing in the family where I could see people starting businesses and taking risky bets and succeeding and working for themselves. So this whole experience was so foreign to me that I felt a lot of anxiety about starting a business. And in addition to that, I was already 38 years old. I wasn't a kid who was just quitting college and working out of the garage. I couldn't afford to just quit and not have backup savings. I had kids and mortgage. So it was really scary. So what was I really thinking? Well, to be honest, I wasn't really thinking, I was feeling. The decision to leave corporate world and start a business has a lot to do with emotions. So why did I actually do it anyway? There were several things that happened. First of all, I had in my career in the corporate world, I was promoted to a middle management, and it was a really big transition from being an individual contributor who knew exactly what she was doing. She had her act together, and she was confident and doing good job and valued by her peers and by her boss, to a person who is supposed to contribute value to the organization differently. And those of you who are in the middle management probably can relate. I went through a severe identity crisis. role in this organization now that I don't have to do the actual work, but I have to orchestrate my team. I hired very talented people on my team. I did not want to micromanage them, but I felt like I couldn't figure out what they were doing. It was impossible for me to monitor. It was impossible for me to quickly, succinctly summarize their work and report it up to the chain of command. There were other things, other dynamics that were happening in the office when you suddenly realize that middle management has a lot of politics involved, and I wasn't ready for that. I'm extremely unpolitical, very undiplomatic. In fact, they told me during the 360-degree surveys, like I have to take diplomacy courses. So it was struggle. Yeah, I really needed to tone my voice, and I was told about my style, and it was extremely painful. So I was not happy at work at all. And those 2 years in middle management were really taxing on my mental health and my job satisfaction. At the same time, what I was seeing is that I was seeing a clear problem in the business. So consumer packaged goods marketing has not evolved in terms of how the process works since I started back in 1998. So for the 20 years that I was in the industry, people were still by far and large planning in Excel and PowerPoint and communicating through emails and just in-person meetings where they spend a lot of time sharing basic information and conveying the facts to each other. And there were lots of different versions of the truth. People did not agree on basics, like what's my budget? What's the status of things? And I was in shopper marketing, specifically in the division of marketing within CPG that was extremely dynamic, fast-paced, very complex. The scope was enormous. So I could see how my peers and I were not really spending a lot of time on strategy rather than tactical information gathering, sharing, repackaging data in Excel, and just getting everybody up to speed internally. So to me, that was a clear problem. And I was complaining about it. I was asking my bosses to put me on a task force, and they in fact did. And that gave me a deeper understanding of the process breakdowns and how exactly to tackle that. So it gave me a glimpse into the idea that business really has a pain. Everybody agrees it's a pain, and people are actually willing to pay money to solve this pain. The other big thing is that as an immigrant, I have this idea of American dream. For me, starting a business is the important and mandatory experience of living in America. So I've always been looking around and trying to figure out what is that thing. Dabbled in a few different ideas. I went to Seattle in 2009 and saw the coffee kiosks on every corner. And I got obsessed, and I got so deep. I studied coffee industry. I learned who the roasters in the area around Cincinnati are. I got a lot of samples. I interviewed the only coffee kiosk owner in Cincinnati, and learned that this business is completely unprofitable. And kind of became a little disillusioned. I actually went as far as to work on nights and weekends in Panera to learn how to operate the cash register and espresso machine. So yeah, I do have this tendency to obsess, go deep, and be very intense. But I didn't see the business model working out. The lifestyle, the profit margins, and food service were completely unattainable. So I quickly relaxed after a few months. So, but that idea of like having a business was always in the back of my mind. In the corporate world, I was feeling increasingly unhappy because of the identity crisis. I was seeing this business problem, and I could see that the business is willing to pay for a solution. So on one day, June 4th, 2014, two things came together. Well, I realized that the solution we were building at that time was just not going anywhere. It was just not the right solution. And then HR called me, and they are like, "Yeah, do you want a demotion or do you want a bonus? I mean, the severance package," because they were reorganizing, and my level was eliminated. And it was amazing because for me, it was a no-brainer. For me, everything clicked in place in just that moment. I'm not a very spiritual person, so but that was like the closest I ever came to like seeing the stars align. So I think it's important not just to have the pain, not just to have a dream, but also be in the right time and the right place. So sometimes people say just do one step at a time. Sometimes it's a huge event that happens and it's so obvious that you cannot ignore it. So for me, this was that huge event that happened on the same morning where I realized that I need to try. I couldn't imagine not even giving it a try and then regretting in the end of my life. So that's my journey. That's how I got there. But I also wanted to say that overlaying all of these, there were several personality traits that I have that I think helped me make this leap. First of all, I was naive. I never done it before, and I couldn't imagine how hard it was going to be. So not knowing was a great thing for me. I wasn't burned before, so this was my first foray into entrepreneurship. I think I'm pretty arrogant. I think I can do things better than others. And in fact, that sometimes hampers my productivity and doesn't allow me to hire a bigger team and go faster. But I really, really feel like I can do things better than many people that I see doing things. So that also gives you kind of like, well, if that person was able to do it, I can do it too. And then finally, I already mentioned my tendency to obsess and go deep and like not stop and just go really intense. And that is a theme of the entire entrepreneurial journey. I have a mentor who early on in this journey, his name is Sonny Jandil, and he worked for a consulting company. And he said, Olga, you have to be maniacal in pursuit of your entrepreneurial dream. Otherwise, you won't succeed. There will be so many naysayers. There will be so many people who won't believe in you, who will tell you no. You have to have irrational belief in what you're doing. And I think I have plenty of that. In fact, I think it played against me in the corporate world when I was being accused of being too tenacious, too passionate, too like sinking my teeth into a problem too much. And I didn't know when to stop and when to kind of relax and sit back and just observe. So this is an asset. This is something that will really serve you well. If that's what you feel you're doing, you're kind of like struggling, you're impatient, you really have a lot of things are on your mind and you cannot stop thinking, like, this is a great thing. This is a trait that the entrepreneurs will really appreciate. So in terms of like steps I took, how did I go about quitting and building the product and building a business? There were several stages. So I just grouped them into 4 major stages. And then I tried to summarize some of the aha moments because it was nothing like I imagined, of course. So first step I took is I started networking. I essentially got obsessed about like learning how does this startup thing work. I've discovered a completely different world. So I left the cubicle world and I went into the downtown Cincinnati where Cincy Tech and Centrifuge and a bunch of other organizations that help startups get started are located. Every city has a network or a club or some sort of incubator like that. So if you're in a major city, I recommend, if you're interested, just get connected. They have a lot of resources, and that's a hub where all of the people who are doing things on their own hang around. So I spent so much time networking and drinking coffee. I had coffee overload. One thing I learned is that people don't do lunches. They don't do 1 hour meetings, like 30 minutes, coffee, tops, and then you just keep moving because you have to learn so much. You're drinking from a fire hose. And you do a lot of that in the beginning, especially if you haven't done this before, just to like understand the lay of the land and build a mental map of like, what is the startup ecosystem? Later, you have to keep your head down and actually start building and not be as distracted with networking. But initially, it is very, very gratifying. In fact, I actually crashed some parties just showed up because I knew Google was in town and they were giving away some awards. And I just showed up at a party at a restaurant and I said, can I just come in? And they're like, sure, of course. So I had to overcome some of my introvert tendencies of like, yeah, I don't want to be there. I don't know anybody there. I just came there by myself. And it was a place where I actually met people who invested in me later and who gave me a grant, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So never give up the opportunity to like learn something new, meet new people, and understand who is doing what, especially early on. The next thing what I did is I started building. In fact, when I met people at the Google event, they introduced me to their organization. They were a VC fund locally, and they said, come over and let's just chat. And I brought 5-page presentation. And I said, here's what I'm thinking. Here's the problem that I see. And here's what I think needs to be done. And they said, great, go and become a product manager and start building your MVP. I had to Google what MVP stood for. I assume a lot of people on the call may already know what that is, but it stands for minimum viable product, which is the prototype or something that's not fully built out, but it gives an idea of value proposition that your early adopters can react to. And I had to go and figure out how to do that because I'm not a programmer. I never done it before. So I need a technical co-founder, or I needed somebody who can do it for money. My natural inclination was to go and find somebody, but I realized that it's not as easy. Convincing somebody to spend full time on a product that they don't understand and it's a niche product for a specific industry is not the same as building a consumer facing app. So I quickly realized that I really don't need a co-founder, or it's hard to get a co-founder. So I had to go for a higher route. And we'll talk a little bit about how that building process works in the next slide. The next thing that I started doing is actually started selling. The little prototype that I built was very, very simple, but it still was better than a slide. So it was clickable and I could use it to sell the idea to my potential clients. And you can sell before you build. So essentially, it was a super quick and dirty prototype that I used at the conferences and networking events to show people and get their initial reaction. You definitely don't need to have it full built out before you sell. That was a big aha moment.
Hmm.
And then the funding, I found free money. I'll talk a little bit more about that. There is free money out there. Amazing thing about America is that there's a lot of resources that don't exist where I come from. And you just need to ask, you just need to apply, you just need to try. And there's opportunities for us. So in terms of networking, let's dive a little bit deeper into each one of that. What I'm doing here is that I'm capturing some of the interesting learning experiences, as well as giving you some resources on the right-hand side. All of these links you can find in the presentation later, so don't worry if you miss some of them. I already mentioned that you need to find some local startup hub in your city. For me, it was Centrifuge in Cincinnati. They played a very important role, not only in educating me and connecting me with potential investors and potential customers, they also helped me find new friends. Because your old friends and colleagues, your peers will no longer relate to you, and you'll be very lonely. But there are other people that are doing something similar and experiencing similar ups and downs that you really, really need. We started with a group of 6 female tech founders in Cincinnati. Yes, there are here. I actually didn't know that there were people doing that thing, but Centrifuge helped us find each other. And they essentially put us on the same email chain and we took it from there. We've been meeting for over 3 years now, and we've become close friends. And this has been a huge mental health support network for me, because it's hard to explain, but it's magical. And several of them were several months or even years ahead of me, so I could see where things are going. I learned a lot by watching them do things, and it's just a different kind of dynamic when you have a startup. You have to have startup friends. The other one is you really need to network with future clients. And early on, it's really easy to get a meeting because everybody's curious about what is she up to. So asking for interviews and coffee meetings was pretty easy. People would willingly go and meet with you. You give them some sort of questions to answer, just explore. You give them some screens or some prototypes to react to. Don't sell them yet, because nobody likes to be sold to. But in these meetings, it's really important to figure out who is going to be the early adopters. I have a friend who actually is a startup founder herself. She says she has a great way to identify early adopters by asking them some unrelated question about future. So she usually just has a casual conversation about, what do you think of autonomous vehicles? And the way people respond, whether they're like, well, nothing really in particular, or if they get super excited and they're like, I'm on the wait list to get one. Those people who are excited about the future, they'll be your early clients. They'll make bets. They'll buy early before it's perfect. They understand that the risk is worth the reward that they're getting. So stay in touch with those. They will potentially be your first buyers when you're ready. You also need role models and mentors. And I find that you really need more than one mentor. There's no one person who can actually teach you how to do this, because none of the experience are the same. Your startup will be different from any other one, but you will need specific deep expertise on a lot of different topics. You will need to build a financial model and perform it to share with your investors. You will need to do QuickBooks setup. So you'll need to have an accountant. You will need people who understand CRM software and help you set it up. So break it down into specific skills and tasks, and then go find the best people who do it. And I prefer that people teach me rather than hiring people to do it themselves. So I hire coaches and I hire mentors and I pay them for their time to teach me stuff, because my big belief is that when you're ready to hire people to do this, you actually need to do the work yourself first. So you know how to outsource, you know that what great looks like. So role models and mentors are extremely important. Pay for their time. Some of them will do it for free, but if you really want dedicated time and in-depth knowledge transfer, paying them for their time is really important. And then investors, obviously, you will have to go to investors and start working early. They will never give you money on the first try. But what you'll do is you'll get feedback on your elevator pitch. They'll give you additional connections to go and pitch to. Investors that I spoke with, they said that 90% of people who come for the first meeting never come back to show progress. And it's really impressive number. So essentially tenacity and just staying the course and showing progress and traction is a huge thing for investors. So if you demonstrate certain traits of a person who's really committed, first you quit your job. Second, you invest your own money into building the MVP. Third, you keep coming back for advice. And there is a saying that if you need money, come for advice. If you need advice, come for money. That's exactly what happened to me. I was just glad that somebody was listening to me and taking me seriously. So I kept coming back to them and showing them the next iteration. And they are just like, okay, I guess it's time. So there was a grant. I don't know if it still exists, but there's a grant administered by the local VC firm from the state of Ohio that they gave me to actually build my product. And it was a huge help because it expedited the process. Instead of looking for a co-founder who could do it on the side, I was able to hire people. On the right-hand side, you see some additional resources. There is a fantastic group on Facebook, Female Founders Community. It's very vibrant and it's huge. And you can find pretty much any kind of business there to network with, and so much wisdom and so much support. I'm so happy I found them a couple of years ago. SCORE is another network for people who retired and who want to be volunteers and help entrepreneurs. This is completely for free, and they have lots of training and other resources. Each big city has a chapter, I believe. Co-Founders Lab is just a website where you can find your co-founder. If you're looking for somebody technical, or if vice versa, you're the technical person, you can find a business person there. And then one of the interesting tools, which I ended up not using because I did not have a co-founder, is the startup equity calculator. People oftentimes have really hard questions like, how do I split equity? They walk you through all the decisions. They ask you a lot of questions in this little form about the commitment and resources and skills and arrangements that are going to be happening, and they just give you a rough number of the equity split. They say never split it 50-50. That's the worst thing you can do. So that calculator is exactly what I needed to walk through that, but I ended up not doing the co-founder thing. Networking with co-founders is really helpful. I ended up hiring people to build it, and that's the next slide. So let's talk about building the MVP. So I was afraid to go and find somebody offshore, but what I'm realizing is that actually everybody's doing offshore. Even the big corporations, everybody has an offshore subsidiary. So it's not about where they are, it's about their skill set and their business ethics. And you can protect yourself to avoid disasters. What I also realized is that when you hire somebody, the dynamic is a lot more straightforward because you've bought services before, you've been a client. It's a communication that we're used to. Having a co-founder is a lot different. It's like a marriage that you're getting into, and there's a lot of new territory that you need to explore, and there's a lot of things need to click. When you're hiring somebody, it's just faster, it's straightforward, and it just works because you've done it before in other industries and other areas of your life. So that's what happened to me. In fact, I found the developers in my home city of Dnipropetrovsk, Ukraine, which is a complete coincidence. I didn't plan it that way. And I found them on one of the founder dating sites. But what I also did, I hired another team more recently, and I found the clutch.co website. It's fantastic to find developers of different programming languages, of different price ranges, different cities around the globe. And I interviewed like 8 of them. Second time around, when I was hiring people, I just interviewed eight companies and I chose one. First time I just went and I just gave them a chance, and it thankfully worked out. I wouldn't recommend doing that again. Always interview at least several and ask good questions. The other thing that I learned is that developing something before you have a great design is premature. So you can hire you should hire a really good UX designer if you don't design yourself, and walk through the user experience before you before your developers write any line of code. In fact, UX designs can be wired into prototypes that are clickable and look very naturalistic. We use InVision software for that. Potential users and future clients can react to it, and they can get a really good understanding of what the user experience is going to be, so that it can actually be used for selling. I brought my little simplistic prototype to the team in Ukraine, and their UX designer took it to a completely different level. I would not be able to imagine something like that myself, because she had the skills and the talent and the passion for my project. So finding somebody who really gets it and cares and can help you implement your vision and take it to the next level is extremely important. So the other thing is I wanted to say is that a lot of people are afraid to do offshore because of language barriers and time difference, and just being remotely located and not being able to come and shake a hand and see people's eyes may be a little unnerving. I was the same, but I think my tendency to over communicate and to micromanage helped me avoid disasters. The biggest thing that happens when disasters happen, when people get there's a fallout and there is missing deadlines, is when people don't communicate. And I thankfully was on the call with my developers 3 times a week. I became a product manager. I made many decisions about design and implementation and business logic because they needed direction, and I was there every single time. We're constantly on Skype or now on Slack. So this is something that I highly recommend. You cannot just like say, yeah, I mean, you guys seem like you're experienced, you can develop my app. No, you have to be on top of it a lot. And if you don't like details, this probably is not for you. This is not like a high level job where you just check in once in a while. This is a very grueling and very meticulous, but thankfully I enjoy that. I actually love seeing how things come together and checking every single button positioning, colors, and steps in the process. So think before you do this, you really need to be on top of this. Otherwise, things will be delayed. You'll be surprised. There will be things that are you don't expect. Oh, by the way, I wanted to mention the Lean Startup. It's a foundational book that allows you to understand how to build MVP and how to validate your product market fit. It also offers a very simple one-page business canvas template, which business canvas essentially replaces your business plan. If you ever thought of starting a business, writing a business plan may be really daunting and like a thing that I dreaded. But when I read this book, what I realized is that really nobody writes business plans anymore. You just need to fill out a one-page template now and then see and start validating the assumptions on that page. And then it grows into a business plan later once you start growing and trying to raise money, because you need a lot more numbers, but do not overthink it because things change all the time and you'll pivot several times before you're actually at the model that works for you. So that's a great book, highly recommended.
Come in real quick before you move on to the next slide. It was from Carol. She's saying aligning and managing key suppliers, not just offshore, is so critical. How do you balance this with all the other work that you need to do? It's a great question, Carol.
Balance. I think initially you don't have any balance. You're just obsessed. You're just doing it nonstop. You wake up, you think your startup, you do a lot of work yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn things that I didn't need to as part of a corporate job. So in the corporate, when you're in marketing, you have agencies, you have internal marketing services departments. You just tell them what to do and you just oversee strategy. I had to learn how to use all sorts of software. Mm-hmm. I had to become a product manager. I had to figure out how to like test for bugs, how to write content, which the next slide will talk a lot about. Like building actually was just overseeing the dev team and then helping them make decisions. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of the additional work is about writing content. And for me, that is the toughest thing still. It's hard to outsource writing because it's such a niche and you have to do it yourself, or you have to find somebody who really gets it and cultivate them into a good writer. So I don't have a good answer for you. It's hard to balance. You'll just know at some point when you mastered something well enough, which you can describe and document and create a process, then you can outsource it. So for example, a couple of years ago, I realized that supporting clients, training them, and basically onboarding clients is something I can document and train somebody and teach if they are good at this. And I hired my first W-2 employee recently. So she was a contractor at first. Now she's a W-2. She's our VP of customer success. And that was the best decision I made because now I've freed up some capacity. I can now focus on other stuff that I haven't figured out yet. I haven't figured out some of the marketing and sales. So that's my focus right now is how do I scale sales and marketing? Because I cannot just do it myself anymore. I need to hire, but before I hire, I have to like figure out the formula. So the formula for support and onboarding and training was the least complex one, and I was able to outsource that, and I had a great candidate. So it's just you do it one at a time. Then
focus. It's important.
Yeah. So selling is the thing I'm passionate about. I did not expect I actually like selling. I was in marketing, but I love to pitch. What I also realized is that selling is about branding too. So before you try to sell a solution, build a brand. People need to know who you are. It was very heartening to come to a large potential client for a first meeting, and they come in and they're like, "Oh, I know you, I read you." So she was already familiar with my blog and my content, and it wasn't a cold meeting. I was not treated like a vendor. I was treated like somebody they respect and read, which is a whole different meaning. So and feeling. So I highly recommend that if before you start selling, try to write. And writing is really hard for some people. It was hard for me because I had this barrier about my non-native speaking abilities and the fact that I didn't have to write a lot. I had to put together PowerPoints with bullet points. But I always was opinionated, so that helps. Writing opinionated content is a must. And why I'm saying opinionated is that nobody wants to read the stuff that's obvious. A little bit controversy, a little bit of emotion, a little bit of pointed language still really helps because it's shareable, it's more viral, and it gets you noticed. The other thing I would highly recommend is invest in your marketing automation in CRM because it gives you such great insights. I use HubSpot for that. They have great discounts for startups to start things out. They're getting more expensive afterwards, but they're really, really favorable to startups. The other resources on the right, you can see writer access. I actually try to hire writers for creating my content, but I realized that I'm reading English, but it's not making any sense. So what I do now is I hire editors who make my writing sound way better. So they have really 6-star editors and they don't cost a ton. And it's really great experience because they do a really good job very quickly and you get a lot more confident about your own writing and you realize that you're not as bad as you thought. Canva is another deal breaker. Like I don't know Photoshop and I'm not a designer, but Canva is just a templatized WYSIWYG design tool in the cloud, which allows you to create a lot of content very quickly without knowledge of any fancy design software. So they're growing like crazy and I watch them. They're also women owned and very, very interesting company. Other things that I obviously do is LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and then PandaDoc is a proposal writing software. Beautiful proposals that are templatized and easy to turn out is really important. So they have great experience. But the biggest part of selling is not necessarily technical stuff and skills. It's more about your attitude. You have to be mentally resilient. And thankfully I am. I always remember that my early adopters are out there waiting to meet me and look forward to working with me. And when people say no, it doesn't mean never. It just means not for now. I had several examples where I just kept knocking on the doors and finally the organization started working with us. So just keep at it, be patient, put on your thick skin, and tenacity must be your asset. Just embrace it and embody it every day. Funding. Let's talk a little bit about funding. So there is lots of ways to fund your startup. One of them is self-funding, and that's essentially what I chose to do initially. I burnt my nest egg. I probably invested about $100,000 of my own savings to get this business started. FFF stands for Friends, Family, and Fools. People who believe in you because they love you or because they just want to support you and they don't care about return. They're just people, they want to be in for the ride. Loans exist for small businesses and you can get a loan in your bank, but obviously it would require collateral. Co-founder sweat equity is a very popular one. So if you don't have a lot of cash on hand, finding somebody who will share your passion and will work with you for free for a while and actually help you build product is what a lot of people do. Angels and VCs are the first places you probably go when you're ready to show something concrete. The Angel List website allows you to find angels anywhere in the world. Here in Cincinnati, Queen City Angels is the local group if you're from Cincy. Also, you can see Crunchbase. It's a database of all of the startups out there to see how much money they raised, who they raised it from. It's a great research tool where you can figure out like, who do I need to go pitch if you have a business that's similar. So it's a great resource. And then women in tech, I didn't really use them, but what I'm learning is that these people are funding women and minority women businesses. There's multiple different grants going on there. One of them is coming up. Application deadline is somewhere in the end of February. So check them out. They seem to be doing some awesome things. And then grants, I got a grant. Like I said, that was one of the ways that I funded the actual product development. And then the other one is customer funding. Customer funding is essentially like selling before you're building. And that's important to recognize because even in Silicon Valley, in one of the later seasons, there was a pivot. They had an epiphany. It's like, why are we trying to raise money? Why don't we just sell? Oftentimes, because of the PR spin and lots of media hype, raising money is seen like the default and the status quo. That's what you do when you want to build something. But there are people out there in the corporate world who are interested in helping startups grow. They do have funds, either investment funds or just budgets to solve a particular problem. So networking with your future clients and understanding if they have funds to invest to help you build something they need is extremely important. And that's what happened to me. I was able to find early adopters who actually bought licenses from me before the product was ready. I just showed them the prototype and they were willing to wait for me to actually make it happen. So do not underestimate that one, especially if it's an enterprise product. If it is a consumer product, oftentimes people go and do crowdfunding. It wasn't applicable in my case, but that's another very popular way to raise money. Now, let's just start wrapping things up. 6.5 years later, I'm not looking at this situation as having a lot of red flags. In fact, I'm embracing my identity, and I feel like it has a lot of positive sides to it. So first of all, as an immigrant, I think we have this ambition that's built in and the risk tolerance. Even if I don't have connections, I'll make them. So being an immigrant helps me. I think mental resilience is also a big part because I already overcome so much adversity just coming to this country, figuring out the immigration process, staying here, finding my first job, getting my education in order, that I think the startup seems just yet another challenge I need to take. As a woman, first of all, I'm not alone. I have role models, but I also still stand out. Oftentimes, I'm the only woman, or I'm one of the very few women in the room when I'm pitching to investors, or if I'm talking to technology companies or IT departments. There's also resources. In fact, women-owned business certification is something you can use to get a foot in the door through procurement departments and supply diversity programs. So there's some leverage you can have as a woman, and there's objectives and goals that many big corporations have in order to meet their business goals and spend enough money with women-owned businesses. The fact that I'm a marketer and not a tech person actually helps me relate to my clients and build my brand. So I didn't have to hire a brand expert because that's what I used to do. I used to do branding for a CPG company. And I still work with CPG marketers. So my former experience as a marketer creates empathy and creates stronger relationships with our users. So that's not really, being a marketer is not really played against me. It played into my favor. And similarly, corporate soldier, I know how the corporations work. I know how they make decisions. I know the challenges they deal with. I know their emotional state. And in fact, a lot of clients who work with me, they realize that, and they treat me as a more of a therapist sometimes, because they know that they can complain and I understand, I can relate, but I'm not part of the organization. So it actually feels very fulfilling. And now I'm 44. 6.5 years later. And actually, that's not a bad thing, because according to Harvard Business Review, there's this little link in that little asterisk. Successful startup founder average age is 45. So I'm maybe a little bit early bloomer, but it's heartening to see, because I think we hear these stories about kids fresh out of college who just build something awesome and they turn into a unicorn. Yes, those are really newsworthy and they're really amazing stories. I respect and I applaud them. But I think all of these businesses that are self-funded, sustainable, successful, and quietly doing their thing are run by people who have earned stripes in the corporate world and who know how to solve problems from the outside because they couldn't be solved as part of a corporation. So now I'm asking myself, why didn't I do it sooner? Yeah, in fact, if I did it again, or if I did it sooner, what would I do differently? Looking at this journey, first of all, I probably would never quit cold turkey. There's a lot of value in your Rolodex and in your logo on the company's name, on a business card. In fact, when you quit and you change the name on your LinkedIn profile or change the company name, you suddenly realize that you're not your company, and your equity and your reputation is not as strong as you thought. So what I would do differently is I would actually network and work on weekends and nights and build network and do research, and then connect with the right people while I'm still inside the corporation. You'll get a lot more likes and a lot more leads this way because people don't feel like you're selling to them yet. Another thing what I would do is I would actually build good karma. And what I mean by that is that I realized I was a jerk to vendors when I was in the corporate world. I would ignore them. I would not tell them the truth. I would just string them along. So don't do that, but also try to learn how to bring them in, because it's extremely important and hard to penetrate the enterprise businesses. And while you're on the inside, I highly encourage you to coach a startup, bring them in, and try to figure out, how do I build championship? How do I build consensus within my organization to actually do something with them? You'll realize it's way harder than you imagined. And just imagine, like, when you're on the inside, you actually have leverage. You have people listen to you. When they're on the outside, they see a fraction of what you see. So just go through the journey, try to bring some money in, set them up as a supplier, introduce them to the right decision makers, and make sure that they actually get paid. What are your payment terms? 120 days, that's crazy. They'll go bankrupt. Advocate for them and figure out what you can do while you're on the inside, because if you do it on the outside, you'll know what you're dealing with. You'll know all the objections that you'll face, and you'll be able to understand the future barriers you have to deal with. And maybe you even can strategize about that while you're still on the inside. And karma, like, I think there is, like, the more you give, the more comes back to you. You never know. These same startup people will become your mentors potentially. And I also would start blogging and publishing your opinionated pieces way before you leave, because people you need to build a following. People who follow and trust you is your biggest asset, and you don't have to have a product to sell to them. You can just talk about important things from the industry. But when you're ready to sell, these people will flock to you. They'll be ready to buy because you already have a reputation. The other thing that I learned is that I was super hesitant to ask for a sale. Like, I was in this research and feedback gathering mode for way too long. And then for me, it was just a point where it's like, one of my mentors, like, just put a sell sheet together, like, just put a price on the sheet. And it was like a huge switch, aha moment for me. Like, why haven't I done it before? Because that's where you get true feedback. People can be super complimentary and spend a lot of time with you, help you perfect your product even. But as soon as you talk about purchase order, suddenly the lights go out. So do not waste your time with those people. Obviously, you don't ask for a sale in the first meeting. You need to involve them and make them feel like they own this process and get them excited about the possibilities. But a sale, a paid engagement, a pilot that's not free is essential to validate your business idea. Investors will look at paid pilots a lot more favorably than on free pilots. They need to put their skin in the game. And the big learning from myself individually is I need to make friends in IT department in the enterprise. My last year was interesting because I realized that there's lots of big things happening on the marketing, automation, and enterprise IT, and I wasn't part of the conversation. So now my objective for this year is to interview as many CPG CIOs and CTOs to understand exactly how my solution fits in and into their agenda. This will help us. I used to think of IT as like sales prevention department, but it could actually open new opportunities and new doors. So do not ignore them and start building relationships with them, even if you're intimidated yet, and even if you're not ready to sell to them yet. And the last slide that I'll say is that enterprise is going to be. Sorry, did something just? Can you still see my screen?
Yeah, it's back. You're good.
Good. Sorry about that.
No worries.
So enterprise automation is going to be growing nonstop. Like, we are at this really interesting point, especially after COVID hit, where things are accelerating. Gartner predicts that by 2023, 40% of all of the workloads and processes will be deployed in the cloud. And it's growing more than like 20% of versus 2020. So there's another chart from Markets and Markets that shows that digital process automation is just on steroids. This is where the growth is happening. So this is a very lucrative space. And the reason why we need to be there as marketers or as non-technical people, if it lets me in, is because they'll be automating your job. You can find yourself on the outside without a job, or you can be part of this process. And non-technical founders really, really rock because you guys come with built-in empathy for the end users. You have the insights about the process, the business challenges that IT and tech people simply don't. And in fact, when I speak to CIOs in CPG world today, they admit that their IT departments are not very strong. They don't have strong understanding of the business. So get yourself inserted in the conversation. You also, because you're non-technical, you will help the tech teams iterate faster. They have to make millions of decisions about colors, positioning, flows, the business logic. Because you're the expert in the process, you will make those decisions automatically. They won't have to wait for several weeks to get the user feedback and show the prototype to potential client. You, as a former user or former potential client, essentially, you'll be able to guide them in a very, very agile way. There's a great little book by Jason Fried. He's the founder of Basecamp, which is part of 37 Signals. It's he basically talks about what it takes to build a successful web application. And one of his points that he said is, if you scratch your own itch, you'll be successful. Basecamp was built by them because they needed a project management system. So that's the best thing to do, is that if you actually build something that you yourself would use, it's a lot more efficient. And the link here is you can download the book. It's free. It's a PDF and it's pretty short. Now I'm going to pause and thank you for your attention and let you open up for Q&A.
That's awesome. Olga, thank you. I mean, there's so many reasons why your story is so wonderful and everything you're doing is so wonderful and relatable to a lot of our members. I think a few things that struck me as we're waiting for questions to come in, was when you talked about trusting your emotion and your intuition. That's such an uncommon thing for women to open up about, talk about, share, and do, especially in the corporate world, but it's such a valuable asset to who we are, what we do, and how we know to move forward when there's an opportunity. So I definitely applaud you for bringing that up. We were having a little bit of side conversation while you were talking about the fact that you've been giving feedback on your tone and, you had called yourself like arrogant. I would have said maybe confident, but it's funny how, all the things that you maybe got dinged for in the past have served you well in this current world and current environment and everything that you're building. So I think that's really encouraging for a lot of our women to hear because, Together Digital is a women's networking organization. So we try to be very vulnerable and transparent with each other. And we hear about this a lot. We hear about a lot of women being told that they're aggressive or dominating. And it's one of those things where it's like, so they constantly are looking, do I need to tone those things down or do I need to actually just have my point of view and amplify it? I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I definitely know that that's a common theme amongst our members.
Thank you for saying that. I absolutely agree. There was a great article. I forgot who wrote it, but they were talking about how women get coached differently from men in the workplace. For men, they get coached on skills. They help them close the gaps where they don't know something or they need to learn some new skill or new system or tool. For women, it's mostly about style. It's about how you make others feel. And I can relate so much. I'm very I take feedback seriously. When the 360 feedback comes back, it was all about collaboration. Olga needs to be more collaborative. Olga needs to be less tenacious. Olga needs to know when to let go. And I was when you're in the midst of it, it's really hard to understand what's going on. Only years later, when I was able to look back, I was able to process that. I realized that, oh my gosh, this is crazy. This should not be like that. But when you're in the moment, you're like, oh yeah, I guess something is wrong with me.
Right.
So it's extremely, it's a tough one.
It is. But for those of you who are listening out there, whether you're a man or a woman, I think hearing those kinds of things and understanding that those instances happen so frequently is so important because how we frame our feedback when we're giving it as managers or mentors, whatever that might be, is just to be cognizant of, how that's coming across or how that could be coming across to others. Also, your story reminded me of a quote that I recently read that a member had shared is that, you don't build a business builds you. So I really loved in your talk, by the way, how you kind of started with like, you bookended it. I love that with like, 6 years ago and then 6 years later, and how you've really kind of almost reframed how you see yourself and how you see your specific attributes as strengths. I thought that was really awesome as well. Not getting any questions right now. I was thinking I had written down at least one or two. I also wanted to call out, I love that you mentioned networking in community. Obviously, that's what I do all day, every day. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for networking and community. Quite honestly, I would still be in an agency somewhere. So I do think that there is a ton of strength in that. And I love that you have found, a small group of women in a similar space to kind of be your personal board of directors. And so for those who are listening, who, whether you're a member or not, we have members who don't take use of this. We do have virtual peer circles and in-person peer circles to really help provide that safe space, because like you said, it can be a lonely endeavor. And so not only do you have to be tenacious and ambitious, but then you have to do it alone. Like you have to draw energy from somewhere. So I love that you found that group. And then shout out to Centrifuge. I think I saw Emily on here earlier. They were also a former client of mine as well. And that space is great. You're 100% right to find a physical space, once we can get back to it, of like having a place to be with other entrepreneurs. It keeps you going. It really does. Because there's going to be days where it doesn't feel like it's doable. So I thought all of your advice and your takeaways were really great. So we will definitely be sharing out Olga's deck with all of those great tips and all of that advice. And then I guess one last thing I'll call out before we hop off here was, you were talking about point of view, and I also think it says something about personal brand. It was funny after our She Rocks last week with Sue Baggett. Do you know Sue? She is with Queen City Investors. So she was our She Rocks last week. So we talked angel investing last week. If you guys missed that, go back and check it out. This is a great like pairing of two She Rocks to kind of watch back to back. And she and I stayed on and talked after we went off live for like a half an hour. She's so great. And she said, you really need to continue to think about your personal brand. Your personal brand is just as important as the brand of the business itself. I was like, oh, you're right. And I think you just reiterated that same thing. So I think that we got that advice twice in 2 weeks for Two She Rocks. Anyone who's listening, members, we've done a number of workshops. I think actually Detroit's doing a workshop here tonight. I had to look at my calendar. On personal branding with our Nashville chapter, but anything you can get your hands on to help you start to hone and identify that, I think is great. Do you have any thoughts or tips on like how you kind of evolved your opinions, your personal brand, or was that like a natural evolution for you?
I haven't really like dwelled on that too much. I just had so much to say. I came out of the corporate. I just needed to tell everybody this is all broken. And I tried to formulate certain pieces and have a theme going on. And it's just stuff was naturally flowing out of me. I think what I was missing is I didn't have the mechanics of how to create a blog post. How many words should it be? Like listicles, what are the titles and how do you send it out? And where do you find the images? So all of this technical stuff was stopping me because I was a little paralyzed and just wasn't sure where to start and how to send out an email campaign. But there was so much inside me that I was just bursting out. As soon as I actually found a really great agency here in town that helped me master HubSpot, they set it up and they taught me the basics of inbound marketing. That's so great. That was a transformational. I think if you don't do inbound marketing and you have a lot to say, like definitely there's, I'm sure, tons of different companies and resources, but HubSpot has a lot of training and courses and certification. They teach you how to package your ideas and how to drive traffic and get people to actually follow you and download your content. And you can, the beautiful thing about HubSpot is that you can see everything, what's going on, who your biggest visitors, who are clicking, who are opening, and you can score and rank them, and you can prioritize who you reach out to. You don't want to be like spraying everywhere. You just want to go after people who seem to be like already enjoying your stuff. So it's been great.
Yeah, no, that's really smart. Maybe that should be one of our follow-ups. She Rocks is HubSpot's kind of quick crash course, because I think it does get asked in our Ask channel a lot on our Slack community. you know, because you're right. Like you can't, I mean, my mother-in-law, she owns a small little, amazing little antique store, but they built a website. I'm like, well, great, you build a website, but if there's nothing for inbound, you're just putting a drop of like a grain of sand into the desert and expecting people to find it. So you're 100% right. If you have a strong point of view, or if you have a problem you're trying to solve and you're not putting out there that you have thoughts, opinions, and a solution, it's not that if you build it, they will come. There's no longer the world we live in. So I think all of this was absolutely, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, like, some people like say, well, how do you like find your passion? And it's the wrong question to ask. I think you just need to do something, and whatever you're doing, it's starting to consume you. You get passionate in the process of doing that, and you start having things to say. So like some people have a lot of things to say in the beginning. Others, as they get deeper and they understand the industry and the domain and the problem more, they start formulating ideas. So don't feel like you have to have this overwhelming passion to start something, especially if you don't have a severance package being offered to you on the platter. Like, and you're doing just nights and weekends. Just pick a topic that you think is going to be on trend, that's within your area of expertise, where you don't have to stray away from your core competency too much. Definitely stay within the domain you are, but then figure out where's everything going and how can I solve certain problems from the outside. And then the passion will come, because you'll uncover such a wonderful world where things are happening and business can be done.
Wonderful. Olga, so much good advice. Thank you so much. This hour flew by fast. I hope you all found it inspirational and informational. Olga shared her contact information a few slides earlier. You can always go back and check the playback as well. These will be up for you to watch if you missed any of this. It was all so fabulous. So thank you again, Olga, for being with us today. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you. My pleasure. Have a great day.
Thanks. Take care, everybody.